The grand chamber was suffocatingly silent, save for the shallow, ragged breaths of two identical men dying on the cold marble floor. Alex and Leo, the twin consorts of the ruthless Emperor Julian, lay in a pool of their own making. For years, they had torn each other apart for a single glance from their shared husband. Julian, however, was a man carved from ice, cruel, dismissive, and utterly repulsed by the twins' desperate, clawing need for his affection. The harder they fought for him, the more he despised them. Today, their bitter rivalry had finally reached its fatal climax. You poisoned my tea." Leo choked out, blood spilling from his lips. His trembling hand was still wrapped tightly around the hilt of the ornate dagger buried deep in his twin brother's chest. Alex gasped for air, his vision blurring as he looked up at the gilded ceiling. "If I couldn't have him, neither would you." They had spent their entire lives fighting the wrong war. As the light faded from their eyes, their final thoughts were identical. If only His Majesty were here. If only he would look at me and mourn. But Emperor Julian was not there. He was in the pavilion with his favored concubine, a delicate, manipulative man who had spent years whispering poison into the emperor's ear. It was this concubine who had fueled Julian's hatred for the twins, planting fake evidence of their treachery. As the twins took their last breaths, the heavy wooden doors creaked open. The favored concubine stepped into the room, stepping daintily over the growing pool of blood. A wicked, victorious smile stretched across his face. With the twins dead by their own hands, his path to becoming the sole empress was finally clear. "Are you kidding me right now?" Ren threw his tablet onto the worn-out fabric of the sofa, throwing his hands up in the air. "This Leo is so stupid. He doesn't even understand his rival is Julian's favored concubine, not his own twin brother." His best friend, Kai, was leaning against the kitchen counter, aggressively chopping green onions. "Don't even get me started on Alex. I have never seen a fool like him before. He poisons his own flesh and blood. If he had half a working brain, he would have poisoned that snake of a concubine, not Leo." "Exactly." Ren groaned, rubbing his temples. They had spent the entire afternoon binge reading the latest viral BL novel, The Emperor's Twin Thorns, and the ending had left them furious. They literally handed the throne to the villain on a silver platter. And for what? A guy who treats them like garbage. Julian is literally the worst. The author is a hack, Kai grumbled, sweeping the chopped onions into a hot skillet. Who writes a tragedy where the main characters are this dumb? "Oh, I'll stab my twin because he poisoned my tea. Idiots. Both of them. I curse the author. I curse this whole plotline." Ren yelled dramatically at the ceiling. "If I were Leo, I would have teamed up with Alex and ruined that concubine's life." "Yeah, well, we live in the real world, so come help me with dinner," Kai said, turning away from the stove to grab plates from the cupboard. All right, I'm coming," Ren said, standing up. Neither of them noticed the flame on the gas stove sputtering out beneath the heavy skillet, while the gas continued to hiss quietly into the small apartment. As Kai turned back and absent-mindedly struck a match to relight a neighboring burner for the soup, time seemed to stop. A terrifying hiss. A spark. "Wait, did you turn off the—" Ren started. Boom. The world erupted in blinding white heat, followed instantly by a deafening roar. And then, there was only a bottomless, crushing darkness. Smack. The sharp sting of a slap across the cheek shocked Ren back into existence. His eyes snapped open, his lungs pulling in a desperate, ragged breath of air that smelled heavily of sandalwood and expensive incense. The roaring of the explosion was gone, replaced by the hushed, scandalous whispers of a massive crowd. Ren blinked, his vision coming into focus. He was no longer in his cramped, messy apartment. He was standing in the middle of a massive, opulent hall with towering pillars of jade and gold. Surrounding him were dozens of men and women dressed in flowing, historical silk robes, all staring at him with wide, judging eyes. And sitting on a raised throne of black iron, looking down at him with an expression of absolute disgust, was a devastatingly handsome, terrifyingly cold man. Emperor Julian. But the most pressing issue wasn't the emperor. It was the person standing directly in front of Ren. A man with a face identical to the one he currently felt on his own head, wearing vibrant crimson robes. The man in red was holding Ren by the collar of his elaborate blue silk robes, his hand raised as if he had just slapped him. But the man in red looked just as confused as Ren felt. The man in red blinked, his jaw dropping slightly. He looked at his own raised hand, then down at his ridiculous historical clothing, and finally directly into Ren's eyes. "What the man in red muttered. His voice was breathless, panicked. Did the gas leak?" Ren froze. Gas leak. He stared at the identical man in front of him. The eyes. The specific, terrified widening of the pupils. The casual, modern vocabulary. "Kai," Ren whispered, his voice trembling. The man in red gasped, releasing Ren's collar as if it had burned him. "Ren, why are you wearing a dress? It's a robe, you idiot." Ren hissed back, grabbing Kai's arm to keep from falling over as a massive headache suddenly split his skull. Memories that didn't belong to him flooded his mind. Memories of growing up in a noble house, marrying a cruel emperor, despising his twin brother. "Oh my God," Kai muttered, his hands gripping his own head as the same alien memories assaulted him. "Oh my God, Ren. We're in the hall. The spring banquet. This is chapter 12. Ren looked around at the whispering courtiers, then up at the emperor, and finally at a delicate, sneering man standing near the throne, the favored concubine. "We were fighting," Ren whispered to Kai, the realization hitting him like a freight train. "We were fighting over who got to pour Julian's wine. We transmigrated," Kai said, his eyes wide with horror as he looked at Ren. "You're Leo. And you're Alex," Ren breathed out. The whispers in the hall grew louder. Emperor Julian leaned forward, his voice cutting through the room like a blade of ice. "Have you two finally lost what little minds you possess?" Julian sneered. "First you brawl like common street dogs in front of my court, and now you stand there whispering sweet nothings to each other. Get out of my sight." Ren and Kai looked at the emperor. Then, slowly, they looked at each other. The hatred that was supposed to be between the twin brothers was completely gone, replaced by a shared, silent panic of two best friends who had just realized they were stuck in the bodies of the dumbest characters in the history of BL novels. The silence in the grand hall was deafening following Emperor Julian's icy command to leave. Leo, formerly Ren, and Alex, formerly Kai, stood frozen for a fraction of a second. The residual terror of dying in a fiery gas explosion was still making their new, perfectly manicured hands tremble. But as they looked at each other, that shared, chaotic telepathy that only best friends possess suddenly clicked into place. "We're alive," Leo's eyes communicated. "We're rich," Alex's eyes shot back. "And Julian is a giant jerk," they both mentally concluded. They turned their identical, piercing gazes away from the emperor and locked onto the delicate figure standing beside the throne. The favored concubine, Leon, was holding a silk handkerchief over his mouth, hiding a smug, victorious smirk. Leon expected the twins to burst into tears, to beg the emperor for forgiveness, or to start pulling each other's hair again. Instead, Leo and Alex slowly straightened their postures. Moving in terrifying, unplanned synchronization, the twins tilted their heads, narrowed their eyes, and delivered a glare so intensely malevolent and utterly unbothered that Leon's smirk vanished instantly. He actually took a half step back, shivering under his layers of silk. "Oh, it's on, you little snake," Alex thought, his lips twitching into a wicked smirk. To avoid suspicion, Leo quickly smoothed out the front of his elaborate blue robes, while Alex elegantly adjusted his crimson sleeves. "We apologize for disturbing your Majesty's peace," Leo said, forcing his voice to sound perfectly smooth and aristocratic, despite wanting to gag. "We shall reflect upon our actions in our quarters," Alex added, offering a flawless, deeply respectful bow that he totally guessed how to do based on watching historical K-dramas. Without waiting for Julian's response, and completely ignoring the emperor's baffled expression, the twins turned on their heels and marched out of the hall side by side, their expensive robes billowing dramatically behind them. The moment the heavy wooden doors closed behind them, the aristocratic facade shattered. "Walk fast, don't look back, act natural," Leo whispered out of the corner of his mouth as they hurried down the grand corridor. "I am acting natural. Look at me, I'm a majestic crimson butterfly," Alex whispered back, tripping slightly over his ridiculously long hem before catching himself. As they turned the corner into the sunlit courtyard of the Imperial harem, both of them suddenly stopped dead in their tracks. Training in the courtyard was a battalion of the Imperial Royal Guard. It was mid-afternoon, the sun was beating down, and apparently, the standard uniform for sparring was non-existent above the waist. Dozens of tall, rugged, glistening men were engaged in swordplay, their six-packs and biceps flexing with every strike. Leo's jaw literally dropped. Kai. I mean, Alex. I see them, Leo, Alex breathed out, his eyes wide as he stared at a particularly broad-shouldered captain wiping sweat from his brow. I see them all. Look at the one with the spear. He looks like a Greek god who got lost in ancient China. Forget Julian, Leo muttered, fanning himself with his hand. Why were the original twins fighting over an emotionally unavailable ice cube when there's an entire buffet of prime, grade beef right outside their window? Tragic waste of potential, Alex agreed solemnly. Come on, let's get to our rooms before I do something embarrassing like ask that guard to bench press me. They navigated the labyrinthine palace using the residual memories of the original twins, finally bursting into Leo's extravagant, gold-leafed chamber. Out. Everybody out. Alex commanded the flock of terrified servants. My brother and I need to intensely reflect. The servants bowed hastily and scrambled out, shutting the doors tight. The second the latch clicked, Leo groaned, throwing himself face first onto a massive bed draped in obscenely soft silk. We blew up. We actually blew up making dinner. I told you the stove was acting weird. Alex yelled, pacing the room and picking up a solid jade dragon statue. Whoa, this is heavy. Do you think we can sell this? Sell it to who? We're Imperial consorts. Leo rolled over, staring at the painted ceiling. Then, a massive grin broke across his face, followed by a bubbling, uncontrollable laugh. Oh my god, we're Imperial consorts. We're loaded. Alex started laughing too, the sheer absurdity of their situation washing away the trauma. We are the most dramatic bitches in the palace. And we have identical faces. Do you know how much we can mess with people? Leo sat up, crossing his legs. Okay, meeting of the minds. We need a strategy. The original Leo and Alex died because they were too obsessed with the Emperor and let Leon play them against each other. Right, Alex said, slamming the jade dragon down on the table like a gavel. Plan 1. Destroy the concubine. That little weasel Leon needs to pay. Not just for setting up the original twins, but for that ugly smirk he gave us in the hall. Agreed, Leo nodded vigorously. We're going to expose him, ruin his reputation, and make him cry. What's next? Plan 2. Enjoy the luxurious life. Alex gestured around the room. Look at this place. I was living in a studio apartment with a leaky faucet yesterday. Today, I sleep on a bed of clouds and drink wine out of golden goblets. We are going to eat the best food, wear the best clothes, and host the most obnoxious tea parties. I am so down for Plan 2, Leo sighed happily, popping a peeled grape from a nearby fruit bowl into his mouth. And the most important one. Plan 3, stay away from Julian. Ghost him, Alex confirmed. Block, delete, unsubscribe. We don't need his attention. We don't want his affection. If he comes near us, we run the other way. The man is a walking red flag. A toxic, cold-hearted red flag, Leo agreed. We will just be the wealthy, unproblematic twin brothers who peacefully admire the palace guards from afar. Alex grinned, high-fiving his best friend. Brother, I think we are going to like it here. Little did they know, their sudden, complete lack of interest was about to do the exact opposite of Plan 3. By the time the sun set, rumors were already flying across the palace, the crazy twin consorts had stopped fighting. And for the first time in his life, Emperor Julian was going to wonder why. The morning sun filtered through the sheer silk curtains of the dining pavilion, illuminating a breakfast spread that could feed a small village. Dumplings, steamed buns, exotic fruits, and roasted meats covered every inch of the rosewood table. Leo took a massive bite of a pork bun, chewing thoughtfully as he flipped through a heavy, silk-bound ledger he had forced his head eunuch to fetch. Okay, this is just embarrassing, Leo mumbled, his mouth half full. He swallowed and pointed a chopstick at Alex, who was currently attempting to balance a grape on his nose. Alex, do you realize how stupid the original twins were? Alex let the grape fall into his mouth and chewed. They stabbed each other over a guy who looks at them like they're moldy cheese. So, yes. Very. No, look at this. Leo spun the heavy ledger around. It was the Imperial Palace Hierarchy Manual. We are Imperial consorts of the second rank. There is no Empress right now. Do you know what rank Leon is? Alex leaned over, squinting at the classical characters. Ah, noble concubine. Fourth rank. Exactly. Leo slammed his hand on the table, making the teacups rattle. We outrank him. By a lot. According to palace law, we practically run the inner court. Leon is supposed to be bowing to us, pouring our tea, and greeting us every morning. The original twins were so blinded by jealousy that they let a fourth-rank side piece bully them. A slow, wicked grin spread across Alex's face. He set down his teacup. Leo, my dear brother. Are you thinking what I'm thinking? That it's time for Plan 1 to officially commence. Leo smirked, closing the ledger with a satisfying thud. Head eunuch bow. A terrified, round-faced man scurried into the pavilion, bowing so low his forehead nearly touched the floor. Why yes, your highnesses. Prepare the Lotus Pavilion by the training grounds, Alex commanded, waving a hand dismissively. We are hosting an afternoon tea. And send a summons to concubine Leon. Tell him his senior consorts require his companionship. The Lotus Pavilion was a masterpiece of Imperial architecture, offering a perfect, unobstructed view of the Royal Guard's training courtyard. Leo and Alex reclined on plush, embroidered cushions, wearing matching silk robes, Leo in sapphire blue, Alex in ruby red. They were currently sipping jasmine tea and loudly rating the guard's sword forms out of 10. Ooh, an 8. Good footwork, but he needs to engage his core, Leo critiqued, pointing a feather fan at a sweaty lieutenant. I'm giving the guy with the battle axe a 9, Alex sighed dreamily. Look at those deltoids. He could chop me in half and I'd thank him. Ahem. A soft, delicate, and highly irritated voice interrupted their viewing session. The twins turned slowly to see concubine Leon standing at the entrance of the pavilion. He was dressed in pure, innocent white silk, looking like a fragile lotus flower in the wind. His eyes darted between the twins, clearly anticipating an ambush, a screaming match, or a thrown teacup. Instead, Leo and Alex just stared at him blankly. Concubine Leon greets the Imperial consorts, Leon said, forcing a tight, polite smile. He gave a shallow, lazy bow, the kind he usually gave them when he was secretly mocking them. He moved to sit down on an empty cushion. Did we tell you to sit? Alex asked. His voice wasn't angry, it was breezy, casual, and utterly patronizing. Leon froze, hovering halfway to the cushion. He blinked, his mask slipping for a second. Pardon. I don't recall giving you permission to sit, Leon, Leo chimed in, picking up a delicate pastry. In fact, I don't recall you performing a proper, full kneeling greeting to your superiors. Have you forgotten the palace rules? Leon's face turned an ugly shade of puce. Your highnesses, His Majesty usually excuses me from. Is His Majesty here? Alex interrupted, looking under the table in exaggerated confusion. Leo, do you see the Emperor? Nope. Fresh out of Emperor's today, Leo replied, popping the pastry into his mouth. He leveled a cold glare at Leon. Kneel. Trembling with a mixture of shock and sheer rage, Leon slowly sank to his knees on the hard wooden floor, bowing his head. This concubine greets the noble consorts. Much better, Alex beamed. Now, come pour our tea. The servants are so clumsy today, and we heard you have such delicate hands. For the next hour, it was pure, unadulterated psychological warfare. Every time Leon tried to sit, they asked for a fan. Every time he tried to speak, they talked over him, loudly discussing the weather, the fabric of their robes, and, most importantly, the men in the courtyard. Oh, heaven help me, Leo suddenly gasped, sitting up straight and grabbing Alex's arm. Look at him, the captain. Down in the courtyard, the broad-shouldered captain of the guard they had spotted yesterday had just removed his training tunic. He was covered in a light sheen of sweat, his muscles flexing as he wiped his face with a towel. Mother of pearl, Alex whispered. Leon, still kneeling and holding a heavy teapot, scoffed quietly. Such crass behavior. If His Majesty knew you were ogling common soldiers. Eunuch bow. Leo yelled, completely ignoring Leon. Go down there and tell the captain that consort Leo requires his assistance with a highly urgent matter. 2 minutes later, heavy, armored footsteps echoed on the pavilion steps. Captain Liang strode in, dropping to one knee. He was rugged, ridiculously handsome, and smelled like leather and sandalwood. Captain Liang reports to the consorts. How may this humble servant assist you? His deep, gravelly voice rumbled. Alex leaned forward, resting his chin on his hand, batting his eyelashes so hard he nearly gave himself a headache. Captain Liang, thank goodness you're here, we have a crisis. Liang's hand went instantly to the hilt of his sword, his eyes scanning for assassins. What is the danger, Your Highness? That potted fern over there, Leo pointed to a medium-sized plant in the corner. It's ruining my feng shui. We simply couldn't ask a delicate servant to move it. You look incredibly strong. Could you? Leon let out an audible gasp of disbelief. The captain looked briefly bewildered, but orders were orders. He stood up, his chest muscles flexing under his leather harness, walked over, and picked up the heavy bronze pot with one arm, setting it on the other side of the pavilion. Is this satisfactory, Your Highness? Liang asked, looking deeply confused. Oh, it's perfect, Alex sighed, tossing a grape into the air and catching it. You have such incredible form, Captain. I mean, posture. Tell me, do you patrol the Eastern Gardens at night? I often take walks there. It can be quite lonely. Captain Liang's tanned face flushed a deep, violent crimson. I serve where I am commanded, Consort Alex. Good boy, Leo purred, offering the captain a silver plate of pastries. Take a bun for the road. You need to keep your strength up. Captain Liang took the bun with trembling hands, bowed hastily, and practically sprinted out of the pavilion, his face still bright red. Leon was practically vibrating with fury. The teapot in his hands rattled against the cups. You shameless harlots. Leon finally snapped, his white lotus persona completely shattering. Flirting with guards. Treating me like a common maid. I will tell His Majesty. He will have you both banished to the cold palace for this humiliation. Leo and Alex slowly turned their identical, icy stares back to the concubine. The comedy vanished from the air, replaced by an intimidating, aristocratic pressure. Leo stood up, walking slowly over to where Leon was kneeling. He looked down at the trembling man, a dark smirk playing on his lips. Tell him, Leo whispered, his voice dangerously soft. Run to Julian. Cry your fake tears. Tell him we made you pour tea. Tell him we looked at a guard. Alex stood up and walked to Leo's side, crossing his arms. Do you think we care about Julian's favor anymore, little snake? We are Imperial consorts. Our families control half the Empire's wealth. If Julian banishes us, the treasury collapses. We spent years fighting each other over a man who isn't worth the dirt on our silk shoes, Leo sneered, leaning down so his face was inches from Leon's. But we're not fighting anymore, Leon. We're united. And we are going to make your life a living, breathing nightmare. Now, Alex clapped his hands together cheerily. My teacup is empty. Pour. And if you spill a single drop, I'll have the eunuchs scrub the courtyard with your toothbrush. Leon, pale and shaking, looked into the eyes of the two men he had once manipulated so easily. What he saw there terrified him. They weren't desperate anymore. They were bored, wealthy, and utterly immune to his usual games. Slowly, humiliatingly, concubine Leon raised the teapot and poured. The heavy scent of ink and expensive dragonwood incense filled Emperor Julian's private study. Behind his massive mahogany desk, Julian sat with a face like thunder. He was undeniably breathtaking, with sharp, aristocratic features, piercing obsidian eyes, and a jawline carved from marble, but right now, his handsome face was twisted into a scowl of pure fury. Kneeling beside his chair, clutching the hem of Julian's golden robes, was concubine Leon. Leon was putting on the performance of a lifetime. Tears streamed down his porcelain cheeks, his shoulders shaking with delicate, practiced sobs. Your Majesty, it was humiliating, Leon wept, dabbing his eyes with a silk handkerchief. They forced me to kneel on the hard floor for over an hour. They refused to let me speak. And worse, they paraded a common guard into the pavilion and flirted with him right in front of me. They have no respect for the Imperial harem, and no respect for you. Julian's fist slammed onto the desk, cracking a priceless jade inkstone. Enough, Julian hissed, his voice cold and venomous. Those two spoiled brats have gone too far. I tolerated their pathetic, clawing jealousy because it kept them busy fighting each other. But to humiliate you, to mock my authority by entertaining guards, they have lost their minds. He stood up, his dark robes billowing around him. Guards, summon Consort Leo and Consort Alex immediately. If they think they can act like tyrants in my palace, I will remind them what the cold palace looks like. Leon buried his face in his hands, hiding a triumphant, wicked smile. Finally, he thought, they are finished. 20 minutes later, the heavy doors to the study swung open. Julian stood rigidly by his desk, expecting the twins to rush in, fall to their knees, and beg for forgiveness as they always did. He expected tears, apologies, and the desperate, pathetic pleading that usually disgusted him. Instead, Leo and Alex strolled through the doors at a leisurely pace. They weren't crying. They weren't shaking. In fact, Leo was casually peeling a tangerine, while Alex was fanning himself lazily with a painted silk fan. They looked less like prisoners facing judgment and more like tourists mildly annoyed by a delay in their itinerary. They stopped a few feet from the Emperor. Neither of them bowed. "You summoned us, Your Majesty?" Leo asked, popping a tangerine slice into his mouth. "Make it quick, if you don't mind. We have a fitting with the royal tailor in 20 minutes. I'm trying to decide between emerald green and sapphire blue." Julian's eyes widened in sheer disbelief. Beside him, Leon let out a loud, dramatic gasp of offense. "Insolence!" Julian roared, the walls of the study seeming to shake with his anger. "Get on your knees. You dare stand before me with such arrogance after what you did to Leon? After you disgraced the royal family by throwing yourselves at the palace guards?" Leo and Alex slowly turned their heads to look at Leon, who shrank back slightly under their identical, chilling glares. Then, they looked back at Julian. "Are you quite finished yelling?" Alex sighed, snapping his fan shut. "It's giving me a migraine, and I just had my temples massaged." "You are testing my patience," Julian snarled, taking a threatening step forward. "I do not care about your petty games, but I will not allow you to abuse my favored concubine. For your crimes today, I am stripping you of your palace allowances, and you will be confined to the cold palace for 3 months. Perhaps freezing in the dark will teach you some humility." The room fell dead silent. Leon waited for the screaming to start. He waited for the twins to throw themselves at Julian's feet. Instead, Leo threw his head back and laughed. It wasn't a desperate laugh, or a hysterical one. It was a cold, sharp, genuinely amused laugh that sent a shiver down Julian's spine. A moment later, Alex joined in, chuckling as he tossed his fan onto a nearby table. "The cold palace," Leo chuckled, wiping a fake tear from his eye. "Oh, Julian, you really are incredibly pretty, but my God, you are dense." Julian froze, his mind struggling to process the blatant disrespect. "What did you just call me?" "I called you dense," Leo repeated smoothly, his smile vanishing, replaced by a look of absolute, icy authority. He took a slow step toward the Emperor. "You seem to have forgotten exactly who you were talking to. So, let me refresh your memory." Leo pointed a perfectly manicured finger at Julian's chest. "You are Emperor Julian, but before that, you were the 8th prince. The illegitimate, despised son of a lowly palace maid. You had no backing, no money, and no allies. You were a footstool for the crown prince. How dare you bring up my past?" Julian began, his face pale with fury. "Shut up, I'm talking," Leo snapped, his voice cracking like a whip. Julian actually closed his mouth, stunned. Alex stepped up beside his brother, crossing his arms. "Do you want to know why you are wearing that crown, Julian? Do you think it was your brilliant mind? Your sword skills? No. You are sitting on that throne because our father, the Grand Duke of the North, bought it for you." The original Leo and Alex corrected himself smoothly, "We were obsessed with you. We cried, we begged, we threw tantrums until our father emptied half his treasury to bribe the ministers. He sent his private army to secure the capital during the rebellion. He gave you the throne as a wedding gift because his stupid sons were in love with you." Julian stared at them, his chest heaving, his fists clenched at his sides. He knew this. Deep down, the entire court knew this. But no one had ever dared to say it to his face. He had spent the last 3 years trying to ignore the fact that he was a puppet kept in power by the twins' family. "We used to crave your affection," Leo said, his voice dripping with venom. "We let you treat us like dirt. We let you parade this little weeping willow," he gestured dismissively at Leon, "in front of us to make us jealous. But we woke up today, Julian. And we realized something very important. You are a terrible investment," Alex finished with a smirk. "You threaten us with the cold palace." Leo leaned in, looking Julian dead in the eye. "Put us in the cold palace, Julian. I dare you. Lock us up. See what happens when I send a letter to my father telling him my husband is mistreating me. See how fast the Northern Army marches on the capital. See how quickly the treasury funds for your new palace renovations dry up. Leon was trembling violently now, backing away until he hit the bookshelf. He suddenly realized the terrifying truth: Julian couldn't protect him. Julian couldn't even protect himself. You. Julian's voice was barely a whisper, his dark eyes wide with a mixture of rage and sudden, crushing realization. You are committing treason. We are stating facts, Alex corrected cheerfully. Now, here are the new rules, Your Majesty. You and your little pet will stay out of our way. We will live in our quarters, spend our family's money, and do whatever we please. We don't care who you sleep with, and we don't want your attention. Leo turned around, smoothing out his robes. But if you ever yell at us again, or if this little snake Leon so much as looks at us wrong, we will bankrupt your empire and replace you with one of your brothers. Understood. Julian stood paralyzed, utterly stripped of his power in his own study. He couldn't speak. He couldn't move. Excellent, Leo said, patting Julian patronizingly on the shoulder. Glad we had this little chat. Come along, Alex. I think I'm going with the emerald green silk after all. Good choice, it brings out your eyes, Alex agreed. Without waiting for a dismissal, the twin consorts turned their backs on the most powerful man in the empire and walked out of the study, leaving Emperor Julian standing in the ruins of his shattered ego. The heavy mahogany doors of the Imperial study slammed shut, leaving a suffocating, ringing silence in their wake. Emperor Julian remained frozen, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge of his ruined desk. His chest heaved with ragged breaths. Never in his entire life, not even when he was a despised, nameless prince, had anyone dared to speak to him with such absolute, eviscerating contempt. A terrible investment. The words echoed in his mind, burning like acid. From the corner of the room, concubine Leon slowly pushed himself off the floor. His knees were bruised, his silk robes crumpled, but his mind was already spinning a web of damage control. He could see the Emperor's pride fracturing, and if Julian's power crumbled, Leon's did too. Your Majesty, Leon whispered, his voice trembling as he glided over and gently placed a hand on Julian's rigid arm. Please, do not listen to their venom. They speak out of madness. Julian shrugged Leon off, his dark eyes blazing. Madness. They threatened to bring the Northern Army to the capital. They reminded me that I am a beggar wearing a crown they bought. No, my Emperor, no. Leon quickly moved to stand in front of Julian, framing the Emperor's handsome face with his delicate hands. He looked up with wide, tear-filled eyes. Think about it, Your Majesty. For 3 years, they have worshipped the ground you walk on. They tore each other apart for a single glance from you. Does an obsession like that vanish overnight? Julian frowned, his breathing slowing just a fraction. What are you saying? I am saying it is a trick, Leon purred, his voice soothing and sweet. They realized their childish brawling was driving you further away. So, what is the next logical step for desperate, love-starved fools? They are playing a game, Your Majesty. They are playing hard to get. They said those cruel things simply to force you to look at them. To assert dominance. They want you to chase them. Julian stared at Leon. The explanation was absurd, given the sheer, terrifying conviction in Leo and Alex's eyes. But Julian's ego was a fragile, monstrous thing. It eagerly latched onto Leon's lie, preferring the delusion of being desired over the harsh reality of being obsolete. A game, Julian muttered, his posture straightening. A cold, arrogant sneer returned to his lips. They think they can manipulate me by pretending not to care. Exactly, Leon smiled, relieved that his own position was secure again. Then we shall teach them a lesson, Julian said smoothly, wrapping an arm around Leon's waist and pulling him close. If they want to play a game of jealousy, we will give them a masterclass. Let us see how long their icy facade lasts when they realize I truly, deeply do not care about them. For the next 2 weeks, the Imperial Palace was subjected to the most obnoxious, theatrical display of affection in its history. Emperor Julian went out of his way to flaunt Leon. He bestowed the concubine with chests of rare southern pearls. He ordered the imperial kitchens to prepare Leon's favorite delicacies at every meal. But most importantly, Julian made sure these grand gestures happened directly in front of the twins. On Tuesday, Julian and Leon took a romantic stroll through the exact pavilion where Leo and Alex were playing a modern card game they had reinvented using palace stationery. Julian stopped directly in their line of sight, pulled Leon into his arms, and kissed him passionately. Leo simply looked up from his cards, blinked, and leaned over to Alex. I'll give it a 2 out of 10. The angle is awkward. Zero chemistry, Alex agreed, shuffling the deck. It looks like he's trying to eat a live fish. Got any threes? Go fish, Leo replied, not even glancing back at the Emperor. On Friday, Julian ordered a massive fireworks display over the lake, dedicating it loudly to his one and only love, Leon. He had made sure the twins were seated on the terrace directly below him. Instead of weeping in jealousy, Leo and Alex brought out heavy blankets, a massive tray of roasted meats, and spent the entire evening cheering for the fireworks, completely ignoring the Emperor throwing daggers at the back of their heads. They are cracking, Leon assured Julian later that night, though his voice lacked conviction. They are just hiding their tears. They were eating a whole roasted duck, Leon, Julian snapped, rubbing his temples. I didn't see a single tear. Despite his growing frustration, Julian doubled down, convinced that their breaking point was just around the corner. He planned to deliver the final, crushing blow at the grand welcome banquet for the returning third prince. The great hall of radiant harmony was bathed in the warm glow of 1,000 floating lanterns. The air was thick with the smell of roasted pork, sweet wine, and the tense excitement of the nobility. Tonight was the celebration of General William, the third prince. He was Julian's older half-brother, a man who had spent the last 5 years defending the Empire's treacherous northern borders. While Julian stayed in the capital playing politics, William was out slaughtering enemy warlords. Julian sat on his elevated throne, holding Leon's hand tightly for the entire court to see. He looked down at the twin consorts' table, waiting for them to break. Leo and Alex, however, were currently debating the structural integrity of a massive sugar sculpture in the center of the room. I'm telling you, the dragon's head is too heavy. It's going to snap, Leo pointed with his silver chopstick. Nah, the sugar is crystallized. It'll hold, Alex argued, taking a sip of plum wine. 5 gold pieces says it stays intact. You're on. A massive gong echoed through the hall, cutting through the chatter. The heavy, gilded doors at the far end of the room swung open. The Imperial herald slammed his staff against the floor. Presenting His Imperial Highness, the Third Prince, Grand General of the Northern Vanguard, Prince William. The room fell into a reverent hush as a figure stepped through the doors. Leo and Alex casually turned their heads to look, expecting an old, grizzled man with a gray beard. Instead, time seemed to slow down. General William was, to put it mildly, a masterpiece of human genetics. He was incredibly tall, his broad, muscular frame straining against the dark, midnight blue silk of his formal military robes. Unlike the delicate, powdered nobles of the court, William had skin kissed by the sun and weathered by the wind. A thin, rugged scar cut across his sharp jawline, adding to his dangerous, untamed aura. His eyes were the color of storm clouds, sharp and intelligent, and his dark hair was tied back in a messy, warrior's tail. He moved with the lethal, heavy grace of a predator, his polished boots echoing loudly against the marble floor. At their table, the twin brothers froze. Leo's chopstick slipped from his fingers, clattering onto his plate. Alex swallowed hard, his plum wine suddenly feeling like dust in his throat. Oh no, they both thought simultaneously. William stopped in the center of the hall, staring up at Julian with a look of cool, detached respect. I greet His Majesty, the Emperor. The northern borders are secure. His voice was deep, rich, and commanded the room effortlessly. At the twins' table, the shared brain cell was currently short-circuiting. Kai, Leo whispered, his eyes wide, completely forgetting to use their new names. Do you see what I see? I see a 6'3" slab of absolute perfection, Alex whispered back, unblinking. I call dibs. You absolutely do not call dibs, Alex hissed, leaning in closer to his brother. I saw him first. We literally looked at the exact same millisecond. Leo argued, adjusting his collar, suddenly hyper-aware of how his hair looked. Besides, I'm wearing blue. He's wearing blue. It's fate. I will set your blue robes on fire, Alex replied smoothly, picking up a fresh cup of wine to fan his flushed face. He looks like a man who appreciates the passion of a red robe. Up on the throne, Julian watched the twins intently, expecting them to finally look up at him and Leon with desperate, longing eyes. Instead, he saw them leaning into each other, whispering furiously, their cheeks flushed, their eyes glued to the center of the room. Julian frowned. Why are they staring at my brother? General William, Julian projected his voice, trying to regain the room's attention. We welcome you back to the capital. Please, take your seat. Tonight, we celebrate your victory. As William turned to walk toward his designated table, his storm cloud eyes swept across the room. For a brief, electrifying second, his gaze locked onto the twins' table. He paused, his expression unreadable as he took in the identical, stunningly beautiful faces of Emperor Julian's notorious consorts, who were currently staring at him like he was the last drop of water in a desert. William gave a polite, almost imperceptible nod of his head toward them, a ghost of a smirk playing on his lips before continuing to his seat. Leo kicked Alex under the table. He nodded at me. He nodded at us, you delusional fool. Alex kicked him back. Plan 3 is officially modified. We stay away from Julian, but we are definitely going to welcome the general home. The morning after the welcome banquet, the atmosphere in Consort Leo's chambers was less imperial grace and more military war room. A massive map of the palace grounds was unrolled across the mahogany table. Alex was using little jade game pieces to track General William's reported movements, while Leo was busy aggressively adjusting the collar of his most flattering, sheer-sleeved azure robe. Okay, intel says the general trains in the eastern courtyard at dawn, visits the armory at mid-morning, and reads military reports in the pavilion by the lotus pond before lunch, Alex rattled off, tapping a jade piece on the map. We need to execute a flawless, casual ambush. I am bringing snacks, Leo announced, holding up an intricately carved wooden lacquered box. Men love food. I had the kitchens make high-protein sesame bites and iced jasmine tea. It's practical, it shows I care about his gains, and it gives me an excuse to stare at his biceps while he eats. Excuse me, but we are bringing snacks, Alex corrected, snatching one of the sesame bites and popping it into his mouth. And we need to establish the rules of engagement. No tripping him. No faking a fainting spell into his arms. We are modern, sophisticated men. Speak for yourself, Leo smirked, checking his reflection in a bronze mirror. If I see a chance to trip over a perfectly placed pebble and land on his chest, I'm taking it. May the best twin win. They located General William exactly where the rumors said he would be, the Imperial armory. He was standing by a rack of heavy halberds, stripped down to a thin linen undershirt that clung to his muscular frame, meticulously polishing a massive broadsword. He looked dangerous. He looked untouchable. Showtime, Alex whispered, fluffing his own crimson sleeves. They glided into the armory, their silk robes swishing melodically. Oh my, Alex began, his voice dripping with honeyed surprise. General William, what a coincidence to find you here. We were just admiring the spears. William didn't even look up. The rhythmic shh of the whetstone against the blade didn't break its tempo. This is a restricted military zone, consorts. The Imperial gardens are that way. We prefer the scenery here, Leo purred, stepping closer, holding out the wooden box. You've been working so hard defending the realm, General. We thought you might require some refreshment. I personally oversaw the preparation of these. The whetstone stopped. William finally raised his head. His storm cloud eyes bypassed Alex entirely and locked onto Leo. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. The look the general gave him wasn't just cold, it was laced with a deep, simmering contempt. I do not eat food offered by you, Consort Leo, William said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble that sent a shiver down Leo's spine, and not the fun kind. Leo blinked, taken aback. It's just sesame and honey. I know exactly what it is, and I know exactly what kind of person you are, William interrupted, standing up to his full, towering height. He took a threatening step toward Leo, who instinctively took a half step back. Do not think your new little games fool me. I haven't forgotten the Imperial hunt 5 years ago, even if you have conveniently chosen to erase it from your memory. Leo's mind raced. He frantically dug through the original host's memories. Imperial hunt. 5 years ago. Nothing. There was a massive, gaping blank spot in his brain regarding anything to do with Prince William. General, I assure you, Leo started. Keep your distance, Leo, William snarled softly, his jaw ticking. I tolerated your existence because my brother was fool enough to marry you. But if you try to bring your poison near me again, I will forget my manners. With a final, withering glare, William sheathed his sword, grabbed his armor, and strode out of the armory, leaving the twins standing in stunned silence. For a long moment, the only sound in the armory was the distant clanking of blacksmiths. Alex slowly turned to look at Leo. Well, that was aggressively hostile. What exactly did you do to him at the Imperial hunt? I don't know. Leo groaned, clutching his hair. I have no memory of it. The original Leo must have blocked it out, or he was so obsessed with Julian that he deleted everyone else from his brain. What could I possibly have done to make a war god hate me? Maybe you shot his horse, Alex suggested unhelpfully. Or pushed him into a mud puddle. You were a pretty terrible person before I got here. You were just as terrible. Leo shot back. Then, he paused. A slow, determined smile began to spread across his face. He looked at the doorway William had just stormed through. Are you smiling? Alex asked, horrified. The man just verbally drop-kicked you. Alex, Leo said softly, his eyes gleaming with a chaotic fire. He hates me. He has a secret, tragic past with my body. He's cold, he's rude, and he's holding a grudge. And that makes him a tsundere, Leo declared, slamming the snack box shut. The cold exterior is just a wall. We just have to break it down. This isn't a rejection, it's an invitation to try harder. Alex stared at his twin, then broke into a massive grin. You are absolutely insane. I love it. If you think I'm letting you solve the mystery of the grumpy general all by yourself, you're dead wrong. The competition is back on. Over the next week, the twins became relentless. If William was at the archery range, Alex was there, struggling to pull back a bowstring, loudly complaining about needing a strong man to help him. If William was at the stables, Leo was there, casually leaning against a fence, fanning himself and offering the general water with a shameless, devastating wink. William ignored them. He scowled. He walked away. But the twins just giggled, completely unfazed by his icy demeanor. To them, it was the most fun they'd had since they transmigrated. While the twins were busy throwing themselves at the third prince, another man in the palace was slowly losing his mind. Emperor Julian stood on the high balcony of his study, his knuckles white as he gripped the marble railing. Down below, by the koi pond, he could see his older brother William reading a scroll. And right next to him, practically draped over the stone benches, were Leo and Alex. Even from this distance, Julian could hear the twins' melodic laughter. He could see Leo playfully tossing a piece of fish food, deliberately aiming so it bounced off William's armored boot, trying to get his attention. Julian's chest tightened with a dark, ugly emotion. Jealousy. For 3 years, those laughs, those desperate bids for attention, those beautiful, identical faces had been directed solely at him. He had hated it. He had found them suffocating. But now that their attention was gone, now that it was aimed at his older, stronger, more accomplished brother, Julian felt like he was starving. Your Majesty, a soft voice murmured from behind. Concubine Leon approached, holding a tray of peeled grapes. He looked pale and anxious. Ever since the banquet, Julian had barely spoken to him. I brought you your favorites, Leon offered, his voice trembling slightly as he held up a grape. You haven't eaten all morning. Please, my emperor, ignore those shameless harlots. They are just trying to make you angry. Julian didn't even look at the grape. With a sudden, violent swipe of his hand, he slapped the tray out of Leon's grasp. Silver clattered against the marble floor, grapes scattering everywhere. Leon gasped, shrinking back. Do not speak to me as if I am a fool, Leon, Julian hissed, his eyes still locked on the courtyard below. They are not playing a game. They aren't looking at me. They are looking at him. Julian's fragile ego couldn't handle the reality. His consorts, the ones whose family essentially owned his throne, were openly flirting with the only man in the empire who could legitimately threaten his rule. I am the emperor, Julian growled, his dark eyes flashing with a possessive, toxic fury. They belong to me. They are mine. Without a backward glance at the trembling concubine on the floor, Julian spun around, his golden robes billowing, and marched out of the study. He was going to put an end to this. He was going to march down to that koi pond, assert his dominance, and remind Leo, Alex, and William exactly who owned the Imperial harem. The tranquil atmosphere by the koi pond was utterly shattered by the sound of a dozen heavily armored Imperial guards marching into the courtyard. Leo, who was currently attempting to teach General William how to skip flat stones across the water's surface, paused with his arm raised. Alex, who was fanning himself on a stone bench while shamelessly admiring the stretch of William's uniform across his back, let out a long, exaggerated sigh. "Oh, look," Alex drawled, not bothering to stand up. "A dark cloud has descended upon our lovely afternoon." Emperor Julian stormed through the moon gate, his golden robe swishing violently, his face twisted into an ugly mask of rage and jealousy. He marched straight toward the pond, stopping between the twins and his older brother. "Get away from them," Julian snarled, his eyes fixed on William. William didn't flinch. He slowly turned to face the Emperor, his expression settling into its usual, impenetrable mask of ice. He gave a minimal, rigidly formal bow. "Greetings, Your Majesty. We were merely—" "I know exactly what you are doing," Julian interrupted, his voice echoing loudly across the courtyard, drawing the stares of terrified servants hiding behind the pillars. "Do you think I am blind, William? Do you think I don't see your treasonous little plot?" Leo tossed his skipping stone up and caught it, looking at Alex. 10 coins say he brings up the throne." "That's a sucker's bet," Alex whispered back. "I'm not taking it. You returned from the border playing the humble war hero," Julian sneered, stepping aggressively into William's personal space. "But underneath, you are scheming. You think you can seduce my consorts. You think you can use the Grand Duke's wealth to buy the military, overthrow me, and take the throne for yourself." William's jaw clenched, a muscle ticking violently in his cheek. "I have no interest in your throne, Julian. And I have even less interest in your consorts. They approached me." "Liar," Julian barked, his fragile ego refusing to accept that the twins were acting on their own. He pointed a shaking finger at William's chest. "You have always coveted what is mine. And now you stoop to begging for scraps. Are you truly so pathetic?" Julian let out a dark, mocking laugh, leaning in closer. "Is this just like the Imperial hunt 5 years ago, brother? You thought you had them wrapped around your finger back then, didn't you? But in the end, who did they choose? They chose me. They begged to marry me. And they threw you away like garbage." The words struck William like a physical blow. The impenetrable ice that usually guarded the general's emotions cracked, revealing a deep, raw, and terrifying fury beneath. His storm cloud eyes darkened, his fists clenching so hard his leather gauntlets creaked. For a terrifying second, Leo thought William was going to draw his sword and behead the Emperor right then and there. But William didn't look at Julian. Slowly, heavily, the general turned his gaze to Leo and Alex. The look in his eyes was so profoundly agonizing, so full of ancient betrayal and venomous hatred, that Leo actually dropped his skipping stone. "General," Leo started, dropping his playful modern persona. For the first time, he felt a genuine spike of dread. "Do not speak to me," William's voice was a guttural, shaking rumble. He looked at the identical faces of the men he had once loved more than his own life. "You want to play your twisted games? Play them with the fool you married. I am done being your entertainment." William took a step back, his posture rigid. "I am leaving the capital tonight. I am returning to the northern border, and I will never return to this vile palace. And if either of you ever cross my path again, I swear to the heavens, I will not hold back my blade." With a final, devastating glare, William turned on his heel and strode out of the courtyard. Julian stood by the pond, a smug, deeply satisfied smirk spreading across his face. He turned to the twins, expecting them to be in tears. "Let that be a lesson to you. I am the only one who—" "Shut up, Julian," Alex snapped, his voice sharp and distracted. Julian choked on his words, his smirk vanishing. Leo was staring at the empty moon gate where William had disappeared, his brow furrowed in deep confusion. He walked over to Alex. "Kai," Leo whispered softly. "Did you see his eyes?" "Yeah," Alex murmured, looking equally disturbed. "That wasn't just a guy annoyed by his flirting. That was heartbreak. What the hell did the original twins do to him 5 years ago?" In his dimly lit private quarters, General William ripped off his formal silk robes, tossing them onto the floor in disgust. He grabbed his heavy leather traveling packs, aggressively shoving tunics, maps, and armor inside. He needed to leave. He needed to get the stench of the capital, and the sight of them, out of his mind. As he yanked a heavy wooden jewelry box from his desk to pack his military seals, the latch slipped. The box clattered onto the desk, spilling its contents. Among the wax seals and bronze medals, a delicate object rolled across the polished wood and fell to the floor with a soft clink. William froze. He slowly crouched down, his large, calloused hand reaching out with a trembling gentleness he rarely showed. His fingers brushed against a masterfully carved jade hairpin. It was designed as two intertwined dragons, meant to be worn by a couple. He had bought it 5 years ago. William closed his eyes, his breathing turning ragged as the memories he had spent half a decade trying to bury violently clawed their way back to the surface. 5 years ago, before Julian was the emperor, and before the twins were infamous, vicious consorts, there was a brief, golden summer. William, the quiet, overlooked prince, had found unexpected solace in the company of the Grand Duke's twin sons. Leo and Alex were radiant, mischievous, and fiercely intelligent. And miraculously, they had looked at William, not Julian, the favored golden boy, with genuine affection. They had been inseparable. Stolen kisses in the palace libraries. Secret midnight horseback rides. William had fallen completely, helplessly in love with both of them, and every whispered promise they made led him to believe they felt the exact same way. Then came the day of the Imperial hunt. Alex had fallen mildly ill that morning and stayed behind at the Duke's estate. Leo had ridden out with William. As the hunting party chased a stag, William and Leo intentionally separated themselves, riding deep into the ancient, overgrown parts of the forest. A sudden, violent thunderstorm had trapped them. They found shelter in an abandoned woodcutter's cabin. That night, surrounded by the roar of the rain and the warm glow of a small fire, the boundaries had finally vanished. Leo had looked up at William with eyes full of absolute adoration. "I love you, William," Leo had whispered, pulling the prince down by his collar. "Alex and I, we only want you." It was a beautiful, tender, and passionate night. William had held Leo in his arms as they fell asleep, believing with his entire soul that his lonely life was finally over. He was going to ask the Grand Duke for their hands in marriage the very next day. But when the morning sun broke through the cabin windows, William woke to a nightmare. Leo was backed against the furthest wall of the cabin, his clothes hastily pulled on, his face pale with horror and disgust. "Leo, my love, what is wrong?" William had asked, stepping toward him. "Don't touch me," Leo had shrieked, his voice filled with a revulsion so pure it made William's blood run cold. "Who are you? What did you do to me? What are you saying?" William had pleaded, panic rising in his chest. "It's me, William. Last night, you said. I said nothing to a brute like you." Leo had screamed, tears of apparent humiliation streaming down his face. "You took advantage of me. You drugged me, you monster. If you ever come near me again, I will have my father execute you." Leo had bolted from the cabin, leaving William kneeling on the cold floor, his heart shattered into a million jagged pieces. Desperate and confused, William had ridden straight back to the capital, breaking every speed limit to reach the Grand Duke's estate. He needed to see Alex. He needed to understand if this was a misunderstanding, a curse, a cruel joke. But when Alex had met him at the estate gates, the crimson-clad twin looked at William with the same dead, unfamiliar eyes. "I don't know what delusions you are suffering from, Prince William," Alex had sneered, standing on the steps, looking down at him like he was a filthy peasant. But Leo came home weeping. "You are a beast. Stay away from our family. We wouldn't love you if you were the last man in the empire." William opened his eyes, the dim light of his present-day chamber blurring through unshed tears. He had fled to the northern border the very next week, burying his grief in bloodshed and warfare. 2 years later, a messenger had brought the news to his snowy camp. The emperor was dead, Julian had taken the throne, and he had taken Leo and Alex as his consorts. They had used him. They had played a sick, twisted game with his heart just to pass the time before marrying his brother. William gripped the jade hairpin so tightly it nearly snapped in his hand. He shoved it into his pocket, grabbed his traveling cloak, and walked out the door. He was leaving, and this time, he would make sure the twins never infected his life again. The heavy iron gates of the Imperial palace loomed against the night sky. General William, dressed in his dark traveling cloak and leading his massive black warhorse by the reins, was just steps away from freedom. "Halt!" William sighed, a deep, exhausted sound. He didn't even need to turn around to recognize the synchronized, echoing footsteps of the two people he was trying to escape. Leo and Alex stood side by side, blocking the narrow exit of the gatehouse. They were entirely out of breath, having clearly sprinted across the palace grounds, their expensive silk robes completely disheveled. "Move," William commanded, his voice devoid of any emotion. "No," Leo gasped, leaning against the stone wall to catch his breath. "We aren't moving until you tell us what happened. You can't just drop a bomb like the Imperial hunt 5 years ago, and then run away." "Yeah," Alex chimed in, clutching his side. "We genuinely have no idea what you're talking about. We don't remember doing anything to you." William's grip on his horse's reins tightened until his leather gloves creaked. The sheer audacity of their lie made his stomach turn. He finally looked at them, his storm cloud eyes burning with cold fury. "You do not remember," William repeated, his voice dangerously soft. "You do not remember the cabin. You do not remember what you said to me. Or how you looked at me the morning after like I was a diseased animal. We swear to you." Leo took a desperate step forward, his modern sincerity shining through his eyes. "We don't. We have no memory of a cabin. We have no memory of ever being close to you. Please, General, if we hurt you, let us make it right. But you have to tell us what we did." William stared at Leo's pleading eyes. For a fraction of a second, the desperate sincerity almost tricked him. But he had fallen for their acting before. "You are incredible," William sneered, shaking his head. "To commit so fully to a game just to feed your own vanity. I will not play my part in this twisted theater anymore. Goodbye, consorts." With a swift, fluid motion, William swung himself into the saddle. Before Leo or Alex could grab the reins, the general spurred his horse, galloping past them and vanishing into the dark, winding streets of the capital. "Get a horse," Alex yelled, turning to a terrified palace guard standing near the gate. "Get us 2 horses, right now. Your Highnesses, it is forbidden for consorts to leave the palace unescorted at night." The guard stammered. "Do I look like I care about the rules?" Leo snapped, his usual playful demeanor entirely gone. He grabbed the reins of a nearby courier's horse, Alex doing the same. Despite having minimal riding experience from their modern lives, the muscle memory of the original twins kicked in. They spurred their horses, galloping out of the palace gates in hot pursuit of the general. The capital city at night was a maze of dark alleys and closed merchant stalls. The glow of paper lanterns barely pierced the gloom. They had lost sight of William. "William!" Leo shouted, pulling his horse to a trot in a narrow alleyway. "Where did he go?" "I don't know, but we shouldn't be shouting," Alex murmured, his modern survival instinct suddenly tingling. The alley was entirely too quiet. "Leo, something feels wrong." Before Leo could answer, the soft thwip of a crossbow bolt cut through the air. The bolt struck Leo's horse in the flank. The beast reared up with a terrifying shriek, throwing Leo violently onto the cobblestone street. "Leo!" Alex yelled, jumping down from his own horse. From the rooftops above, 3 figures dressed entirely in black dropped silently into the alley. Their faces were obscured by dark masks, and the moonlight glinted off the wicked, curved blades of their swords. "Assassins! Oh, you have got to be kidding me," Alex groaned, standing over his brother protectively as Leo groaned, rubbing his bruised shoulder. "Who sends assassins on a Tuesday?" The assassins didn't speak. They lunged. Alex closed his eyes, throwing his arms up to shield his face, waiting for the inevitable slash of steel. Clang! The sound of metal violently clashing against metal rang out. Alex opened his eyes. General William stood in front of them. He had dropped from the roof above, his massive broadsword already drawn, easily deflecting the strike of 2 assassins at once. The sheer physical power radiating from him was terrifying. "Stay behind me," William roared, parrying a thrust and kicking one of the assassins squarely in the chest, sending the man flying backward into a wall with a sickening crunch. The remaining 2 assassins exchanged a glance and attacked in tandem. It was a fatal mistake. William didn't just fight, he systematically dismantled them. With a brutal, fluid grace, he disarmed the first, knocking him out cold with the hilt of his sword, and spun around to sweep the legs out from the second, pinning him to the ground with the heavy blade of his sword resting against the assassin's throat. The third assassin, seeing his comrades fall in seconds, scrambled over the wall and fled into the night. William was breathing heavily, his eyes wild as he looked back at the twins. "Are you injured?" No," Leo stammered, his eyes wide. "You saved us." William didn't offer a hand. He sheathed his sword with a sharp SHK. Idiots. Both of you. Come with me before whoever sent them sends more. William led them through a labyrinth of backstreets until they reached a dusty, abandoned tea house. He shoved the doors shut, barring them with a heavy wooden plank, and lit a single candle on a broken table. The flickering light cast long, dramatic shadows across William's furious face. Assassins, William paced the room like a caged tiger. Julian must have sent them, or perhaps that snake Leon. Who else would dare? And you two fools rode out with no guards. We rode out because of you. Leo argued, standing up. We just wanted the truth. William stopped pacing. He looked at them, completely drained. The anger was gone, replaced by a profound, agonizing exhaustion. You want the truth, William whispered, his voice cracking. Fine. You want to hear how you destroyed me? I'll tell you. For the next 10 minutes, the abandoned tea house was dead silent as William spoke. He told them everything. He told them about the golden summer. He told them about the stolen moments, the whispered promises of love. He told them about the cabin during the thunderstorm, the beautiful night he shared with Leo, and the absolute horror of the next morning. You looked at me like I was a monster, William said, looking directly into Leo's eyes, a single tear escaping his storm cloud gaze. You screamed that I forced myself on you. You claimed you didn't know me. And when I went to Alex for help, he did the exact same thing. You both treated me like a stranger. Like garbage. William let out a bitter, hollow laugh. And 2 years later, I found out why. You were clearing the board. You were so obsessed with Julian that you used me, threw me away, and pretended our time together never happened just so you could marry the Emperor with clean reputations. William turned his back on them. There is your truth. Now leave me alone. Leo and Alex stood frozen, the weight of the revelation crushing the air out of their lungs. They looked at each other in the dim candlelight. A silent, frantic conversation passed between the two best friends. Did you read this in the novel? Leo mouthed, his eyes wide with horror. No. Alex shook his head frantically. William wasn't in the book. The book started with Julian. And then, their modern, genre-savvy minds began to connect the invisible dots. Wait, Alex muttered, pacing away from William, pulling Leo with him into the shadows. Leo, think about it. Think about the plot of the Emperor's twin Thorns. What is the core premise? Two twin brothers obsessively, irrationally in love with a cruel emperor, Leo whispered back. Exactly. Unnaturally obsessed. They fought each other, they ruined their own lives, all for a man who treated them like dirt. Does that sound like natural human behavior to you? Leo gasped, his hand flying to his mouth. No. It sounds like a forced plotline. Every transmigration novel has a system, or a plot force, that demands the story go a certain way, Alex said, his brain working in overdrive. What if the original twins didn't actually love Julian? What if they loved William? Leo finished the thought, his heart breaking. They genuinely loved William, but William wasn't the male lead. Julian was. The universe, the author's plot, couldn't handle the characters derailing the story. So it forced a correction, Alex said, running a hand through his hair. The system wiped their memories of William the morning after the cabin. It literally erased him from their minds and hardwired their brains to be obsessed with Julian so the main plot could happen. Leo looked back at the broad, lonely back of General William. The man had spent 5 years believing the loves of his life had used and manipulated him, when in reality, they had been victims of a cruel, supernatural brainwashing to serve a trashy BL novel's plot. Oh my God, Leo whispered, tears welling in his own eyes. They didn't betray him. They were overridden. Alex swallowed hard. Okay. We know the truth now. But how the hell do we tell him? Leo stared at his best friend, panic setting in. We can't just walk up to a hardened war god from ancient times and say, hey, so your universe is a fictional book, a magical plot system erased our past lives' memories of you, and by the way, the current souls in our bodies are 2 guys from the 21st century who blew up in a kitchen fire. He'll think we're genuinely insane, Alex groaned, rubbing his temples. He'll probably commit us to an asylum. But we have to tell him something. Leo insisted, his heart aching for the man who had just saved their lives. He's in pain, Kai. We can't let him walk away thinking he was unloved. They turned slowly, stepping back into the candlelight to face the general, armed with the most convoluted, unbelievable truth in the history of the universe, and absolutely no idea how to explain it. The flickering candlelight in the abandoned tea house cast long, dancing shadows on the walls. General William stood near the barred door, his broad shoulders slumped, the formidable war god looking utterly defeated. Leo and Alex stepped back into the dim circle of light. They had silently agreed on a strategy. They couldn't explain the 21st century, BL novels, or plot systems. It would sound like sheer lunacy. But they could translate the system into a concept an ancient general would understand. William, Leo began, his voice trembling slightly. He took a hesitant step forward, holding his hands up placatingly. I need you to listen to me. I know you have every reason to hate us, but you have to listen. William didn't turn around. I have heard enough lies to last a lifetime, consort Leo. It's not a lie, Alex interjected, moving to stand beside his brother. William, think about it. Think about the morning in the cabin. Think about how Leo reacted. Did it look like he was acting? Or did it look like he was genuinely terrified and had no idea who you were? William stiffened. The memory was burned into his soul. The sheer, unadulterated panic in Leo's eyes that morning hadn't looked like a calculated performance. It had looked like a man waking up in a stranger's bed with zero memory of how he got there. Slowly, William turned to face them, his storm cloud eyes narrowed. What are you saying? We're saying we were cursed, Leo said, forcing absolute conviction into his voice. It wasn't a total lie, the author's plot had been a curse on the original twins' lives. A hex. Dark magic. A memory-altering poison. Call it whatever you want, but William, our memories of you, of the golden summer, of that night in the cabin, they were stolen from us. William stared at them, his jaw tightening. A curse. You expect me to believe some phantom sorcerer wiped your minds to make you forget me? Why else would we change overnight? Alex threw his hands up in exasperation. William, look at us. Look at the history of the last 3 years. We are the sons of the Grand Duke. We are wealthy, powerful, and educated. Does our behavior make any logical sense? We reduced ourselves to rabid dogs, clawing at each other, humiliating our family name for an emperor who actively despises us. Leo took another step closer, his eyes pleading. It wasn't natural love, William. It was a sick, twisted obsession forced into our minds. We were puppets. The curse erased you, because you were the one we actually loved, and it hardwired our brains to fixate on Julian. The abandoned tea house fell dead silent. The only sound was the distant howl of the wind outside the barred windows. William's mind was racing. He was a man of war, of logic and strategy. The idea of dark magic was difficult to swallow. But, as he looked at the twins, the pieces began to click together with terrifying clarity. He remembered the suddenness of their betrayal. He remembered the blank, dead look in Alex's eyes when he had begged for an explanation at the Duke's estate. And most importantly, he thought about the last month. If this curse is real, William said, his voice a low, cautious rumble. Why are you speaking to me now? Why did you suddenly stop chasing Julian? Leo exchanged a quick glance with Alex. Here came the second half of the truth. Because a few weeks ago, we almost died, Leo explained softly. Leon framed us. We had a violent confrontation in our chambers. We both lost consciousness. We were on the brink of death. And when we woke up, Alex finished, crossing his arms, the fog was gone. The obsession was completely shattered. We looked at Julian and felt absolutely nothing but disgust. But our memories, they are still fractured. We didn't remember you until you brought up the hunt today. William stared at the two men standing before him. He had spent 5 grueling years in the freezing northern wastelands, surviving arrow wounds, ambushes, and starvation, fueled entirely by the bitter belief that his heart had been played with. To accept their story meant accepting that the last 5 years of his agony were the result of a malicious third party, not the twins' cruelty. It meant they had been victims, too. William looked at Leo. He looked past the expensive silk and the Imperial title, searching for the boy he had held in the cabin. The soft, genuine desperation in Leo's eyes, it was the exact same look he had given William the night of the thunderstorm. Clatter. William's heavy broadsword slipped from his grip, hitting the dusty floorboards. He took a staggering step forward, his massive hands reaching out to grip Leo's shoulders. You. William's voice broke, the impenetrable wall of the war god completely shattering. You truly didn't remember me. You didn't orchestrate this. We swear on our lives, William, Leo said, his own eyes welling with tears. He could feel the residual, profound love of the original Leo surging in his chest, mixing with his own modern empathy. He reached up, placing his hands over William's. We would never have hurt you intentionally. Never. Alex let out a long, shaky breath, leaning against a wooden pillar. So, please, stop looking at us like we're monsters. We're just trying to fix the mess we woke up in. Before William could respond, the sound of heavy hooves and shouting echoed from the street outside. Search the alleys. They couldn't have gone far. A muffled voice barked through the wooden walls. Find the consorts. The tender moment evaporated instantly. William's military instinct snapped back into place. He bent down, retrieving his broadsword in one fluid motion, and grabbed his traveling cloak. Julian's royal guard, William hissed, peeking through a crack in the window shutters. Or more assassins dressed as guards. Julian wants you dead or captured to secure his control over your father's wealth. We can't go back to the palace, Alex said, suddenly realizing the gravity of their situation. If Julian knows we're onto his little assassination plot, he'll just poison our tea tomorrow and blame it on an illness. You aren't going back, William stated firmly, turning to look at them. The cold hatred in his eyes was gone, replaced by a fierce, terrifying protectiveness that made both twins' hearts skip a beat. I have a hidden, fortified manor in the bamboo forest 10 miles outside the capital. My personal vanguard is stationed there. We go there. William unbarred the back door of the tea house, leading them into a narrow, hidden alleyway where his massive black warhorse was tied. Alex's courier horse, though spooked, was still tied to a post nearby. Leo's horse, unfortunately, was dead in the street a few blocks away. We have a logistical issue, Alex pointed out, gesturing to the animals. 2 horses. 3 people. William looked at Leo. The moonlight caught the sharp angles of the general's face, his expression suddenly unreadable. Without a word, William grabbed the reins of his warhorse, stepped into the stirrup, and swung himself into the saddle. He extended a large, leather-clad hand down to Leo. Come here, William commanded softly. Leo's modern brain instantly short-circuited. Oh my God, I'm about to ride a horse with a hot ancient general. Alex snorted, a wicked smirk crossing his face as he effortlessly mounted his own courier horse. Have fun, Leo. Don't hold on too tight, you might wrinkle his armor. Shut up, Kai, Leo muttered under his breath, his face flushing a bright, furious red. Leo reached up, grasping William's hand. The general's grip was impossibly strong. With a single, effortless pull, William hoisted Leo up into the saddle, settling him right in front of him. The proximity was immediately, dangerously distracting. Leo's back was pressed flush against William's broad, muscular chest. He could feel the cold metal of the general's breastplate, but underneath it, the intense, radiating heat of the man's body. William's thick arms reached around Leo's waist to grab the reins, essentially trapping Leo in a protective, incredibly masculine cage. Are you secure? William asked, his deep voice vibrating right against Leo's ear, sending a shiver straight down the consort's spine. Yes. Very secure. Completely fine, Leo babbled, staring straight ahead at the horse's ears, trying to remember how to breathe. Keep your head down, William instructed, spurring the horse forward. They shot out of the alleyway, Alex following close behind. They navigated the shadowy outskirts of the capital, avoiding the main checkpoints. The wind whipped through their hair as the stone streets gave way to dirt roads, and the claustrophobic city opened up to the vast, moonlit countryside. As they rode, William instinctively tightened his hold around Leo's waist when the horse hit a rough patch of road. The gesture was so casual, so profoundly protective, that it made Leo's heart ache for the original host who had lost this man, and flutter for himself, who was currently experiencing it. Plan 3 is officially dead, Leo thought to himself, a small smile playing on his lips as he leaned back slightly against the war god's chest. We are definitely keeping him. The rhythmic thundering of hooves slowed to a steady trot as the dense, towering stalks of the bamboo forest swallowed them. The moonlight filtered through the canopy in thin, silvery slivers, illuminating a hidden dirt path that practically vanished behind them. After an hour of riding pressed against General William's chest, Leo's initial panic had melted into a very comfortable, albeit highly distracting, warmth. He was half asleep, his head resting against the cold steel of William's breastplate, completely oblivious to the soft, unreadable glances the general kept casting down at him. "We are here," William announced, his deep voice rumbling through his chest and straight into Leo's spine. Leo blinked awake, sitting up straight. Up ahead, nestled into the side of a rocky gorge, was a sprawling, fortified manor. It wasn't dripping in gold and jade like the Imperial palace. It was built of dark wood, heavy stone, and iron, practical, imposing, and undeniably safe. Finally, Alex groaned from behind them, pulling his courier horse to a halt. "My thighs are chafing, my silk is ruined, and I am 90% sure I swallowed a bug about 3 miles back." Heavy iron gates swung open as William approached. The courtyard was instantly alive with movement. Dozens of soldiers dressed in the dark, heavy armor of the Northern Vanguard rushed out, carrying torches and spears. "General." A tall, scarred lieutenant ran forward, bowing sharply. "We did not expect you so soon." And the lieutenant's eyes darted to the 2 identical, disheveled men in Imperial silk. His jaw dropped. "By the heavens! Are those the Imperial consorts?" The murmurs rippled through the courtyard. Every soldier in the north knew the stories of the Emperor's vicious, spoiled twin husbands. William swung down from his horse with effortless grace. He didn't explain. He simply turned and raised his hands to Leo, lifting him down from the saddle as gently as if Leo were made of glass. "They are under my protection," William's voice boomed across the courtyard, instantly silencing the whispers. "Prepare the east wing. Boil water, bring clean clothes, and double the perimeter guard. If anyone wearing Julian's colors comes within a mile of this forest, shoot them on sight." "Yes, General," the soldiers chorused, instantly scrambling to obey. Alex practically fell off his horse, stretching his aching back. He sidled up next to Leo, whispering out of the corner of his mouth. "So, just to recap our evening, we broke out of the palace, survived a ninja attack, rode off into the moonlight with the war god, and officially committed high treason against the Emperor. Solid Tuesday." Leo grinned, watching William bark orders to his men. "I've had worse dates." Meanwhile, back in the capital, the great hall of the Imperial palace was echoing with the sound of shattering porcelain. Emperor Julian stood amidst the wreckage of a priceless Ming vase, his chest heaving, his face pale with a mixture of sheer rage and creeping panic. Kneeling before him was the captain of the royal guard, bleeding from a cut on his forehead, his armor dented. "You lost them," Julian roared, kicking a piece of shattered porcelain across the room. "3 highly trained assassins, an entire squad of guards, and you let 2 unarmed consorts and 1 man with a sword escape the capital." "Your Majesty," it was General William. The captain pleaded, his forehead touching the floor. He fought like a demon. He took down the shadow assassins in seconds. By the time we secured the perimeter, they had vanished into the outer districts. Concubine Leon stood in the corner, clutching a silk shawl around his trembling shoulders. He was terrified, not for Julian, but for himself. "Out! Get out of my sight! Find them!" Julian screamed, drawing his own ceremonial sword and slashing it through the air. The guards scrambled out of the hall as if the devil himself were chasing them. Julian stumbled back, collapsing onto his throne. The furious adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a cold, horrifying reality. He didn't care about losing the twins' affection anymore. He cared about the power they represented. The Grand Duke of the North controlled half the Empire's wealth and a private army of 50,000 men. The only reason the Duke allowed Julian to sit on the throne was because his beloved twin sons were in the palace. If the twins reached their father and told him Julian had sent assassins after them. "Leon," Julian whispered, his eyes wide and hollow. "The Duke, he will march on the capital. He will ally with William. They will rip the crown from my head." Leon stepped forward hesitantly. "Your Majesty, surely the Grand Duke will listen to reason. We can say they were kidnapped by the general. We can say William forced them." "You fool!" Julian snapped, glaring at his favored concubine with sudden, blistering disgust. "Do you think the Duke is an idiot? He will know. He will slaughter us all." Leon flinched, taking a step back. As he looked at the Emperor, the man he had manipulated, flattered, and served for years, the illusion finally shattered. Julian wasn't a powerful god. He was a weak, insecure puppet who had just cut his own strings. "I need to pack my jewelry," Leon thought, his survival instincts kicking in. "This ship is sinking, and I will not drown with him." Back at the bamboo manor, the tension of the night was slowly washing away in tubs of steaming hot water. The soldiers had provided Leo and Alex with clean, simple northern clothing, thick cotton trousers, soft linen undershirts, and heavy wool robes in deep charcoal gray. It was a far cry from their imperial silk, but it felt incredibly comfortable. They were sitting in the spacious, fire-lit chamber of the East Wing, eating bowls of hot, spicy venison stew. "Okay, the food here is elite," Alex mumbled through a mouthful of meat. "Forget the Imperial kitchens. I'm taking this chef back to the modern world with me." "Focus, Kai," Leo said, setting his bowl down. "We need a plan. We can't stay hidden in this forest forever. Julian is going to realize that if we contact our father, he's dead meat. He'll send an army." "Let him," Alex shrugged, leaning back in his chair. "We have William. And technically, according to this novel's lore, our father loves us unconditionally. All we have to do is write a letter to the Grand Duke saying, 'Hey Dad, Julian tried to murder us, we are filing for divorce, please bring your army and put William on the throne.'" Leo laughed, a bright, genuine sound. "You make starting a civil war sound like sending an email to HR. It's about efficiency, Ren," Alex smirked. A soft knock on the heavy wooden door interrupted them. "Enter," Leo called out, unconsciously sitting up straighter. The door opened, and William stepped in. He had washed off the dust of the road and changed out of his armor into a simple, dark blue martial arts tunic that hugged his broad chest perfectly. He looked less like a terrifying war god and more like a shockingly handsome, incredibly tired man. He carried a small wooden tray with a pot of medicinal tea. "My medic brewed this for the shock," William said softly, setting the tray on the table. He looked at them, his eyes lingering on Leo in his oversized, simple wool robes. "Are the quarters adequate?" "They are wonderful, William," Leo smiled warmly. "Thank you for everything tonight. We owe you our lives," Alex added, entirely sincere. Again, William shifted his weight, looking down at his hands. The awkwardness of 5 years of hatred, violently overturned by a few hours of truth, hung heavily in the air. I am the one who must apologize," William finally said, his voice gruff but vulnerable. He looked up, meeting Leo's eyes, then Alex's. "I spent 5 years cursing your names. I believed you were heartless monsters. I never stopped to consider that you might be suffering under the Emperor's control as well. I failed to protect you." "Hey," Leo stood up, walking around the table and placing a hand on William's arm. "You didn't fail anyone. We were all pawns in a really stupid game. But the game is over now. We have our minds back." Alex stood up, stretching his arms, faking a massive yawn. "Well, I am exhausted. Escaping assassination takes a lot out of a guy. I'm going to claim the bedroom on the left. You two, do whatever it is people do when they clear up a 5-year misunderstanding. Good night." With a dramatic, knowing wink at Leo, Alex vanished into the adjoining room, shutting the door firmly behind him. The sudden privacy made the large room feel incredibly small. Leo swallowed hard, suddenly hyper-aware of where his hand was resting on William's muscular forearm. He slowly pulled it back, a shy blush creeping up his neck. William watched him, his storm cloud eyes softening into something so intensely tender it made Leo's breath hitch. The general reached into his tunic and slowly pulled out a small object. He held it out in the palm of his calloused hand. It was the jade hairpin, carved into 2 intertwined dragons. "I bought this for you in the capital, 5 years ago," William said quietly, his voice a low, rough whisper. "The day before the hunt. I was going to give it to you when I asked you to marry me. I kept it all this time, a reminder of my own foolishness," I told myself. Leo stared at the beautiful, delicate piece of jade. A rush of pure, unadulterated emotion flooded his chest. "It wasn't foolishness, William," Leo whispered, looking up into the general's eyes. "The feelings were real. They were always real." William stepped closer, completely bridging the gap between them. He raised his hands, gently pushing a stray lock of Leo's hair behind his ear, and then, with trembling, reverent fingers, he slid the jade hairpin into Leo's dark hair. "Then let us begin again," William murmured, his gaze dropping to Leo's lips. "No Emperor. No curses. Just us." Leo's heart hammered against his ribs. He smiled, leaning up slightly, closing the final inch between them. "I think," Leo whispered right against William's lips, "that is the best plan I've heard all day." And as the war god finally, gently kissed him, a kiss 5 years delayed and infinitely sweeter for the wait, Leo knew the original novel was officially dead. They were writing their own ending now. The next morning, the bamboo manor was buzzing with the crisp, energetic activity of a military fortress preparing for action. Inside the East Wing, however, the atmosphere was significantly more domestic. Leo and Alex were sitting at a heavy oak table, bathed in morning sunlight, both wearing oversized tunics that clearly belonged to William. The sleeves were rolled up to their elbows, and they were currently devouring a breakfast of steamed buns, sliced duck, and hot soy milk. William was sitting across from them, fully armored in his dark northern leather and steel, looking like a terrifying warlord. But the illusion was somewhat ruined by the fact that he was currently peeling a mandarin orange and carefully placing the slices on Leo and Alex's plates. "Eat more," William commanded gruffly. "You both look too thin. The capital starved you." "William, if I eat another bun, I'm going to roll down the mountain," Alex laughed, popping an orange slice into his mouth. "Besides, we need to focus. We have a letter to write to our dearest, wealthiest father." Alex pulled a fresh scroll of heavy parchment toward him, dipping a calligraphy brush into an inkstone. "All right, let's draft this declaration of treason. How do we start? Dear father, hope the north is cold. Julian is a psychotic ex who tried to murder us." "Too casual," Leo critiqued, sipping his tea. "We need to sound like the abused, neglected consorts who have finally seen the light. Play the victim card hard. Dad loves us, remember. If he thinks Julian hurt a hair on our heads, he'll burn the capital to the ground." Right, Alex nodded, his modern corporate email instincts taking over. He began writing in elegant, sweeping characters. "To His Grace, the Grand Duke of the North. Per our previous correspondence, the working conditions in the Imperial harem have become utterly toxic. The CEO, His Majesty, Emperor Julian, has created a hostile environment, culminating in a targeted assassination attempt against us last night." William paused his orange peeling, staring at Alex in complete bewilderment. "CEO. Toxic environment. What dialect of the Empire is this?" "It's the dialect of getting things done, sweetie," Alex winked at him. "Just let me cook." He continued writing. "Fortunately, General William has stepped in as our new management. He saved our lives. We have decided to officially terminate our marriage contract with Julian. We kindly request that you mobilize the Northern Army and march on the capital immediately to secure our severance package, the throne. Love and kisses, your favorite sons." Leo leaned over, reading the scroll, and burst out laughing. "It's perfect. He'll be so confused by the vocabulary that he'll just assume we hit our heads during the assassination attempt and march his army out of sheer panic." William sighed, a deep, rumbling sound of fond exasperation. He took the brush from Alex's hand, crossed out the modern jargon, and quickly drafted a flawless, politically devastating letter detailing Julian's crimes, the assassination attempt, and William's vow to protect the Grand Duke's heirs. "We will use this one," William said smoothly, rolling the parchment and sealing it with his heavy bronze military stamp. "I will send my fastest hawk to your father's estate. It will reach him by nightfall." "Show off," Alex muttered, though he was staring at William's strong hands with unabashed admiration. William looked between the two of them, his storm cloud eyes widening slightly in disbelief. After 5 years of utter isolation, having both of the men he loved standing in front of him, looking at him with genuine affection, felt like a dream he was terrified to wake up from. "Alex," William whispered, his voice incredibly rough. "You said the jade hairpin was for Leo," Alex said, stopping right in front of the general, tilting his head. "So, what did you get me, big guy? Or do I have to fight my brother for it?" A slow, breathtaking smile broke across William's face. The heavy burden of the war god completely vanished, leaving behind the man who had fallen hopelessly in love during that golden summer. "The hairpin is carved with 2 intertwined dragons," William murmured, his large hands reaching out to gently cup Alex's face. "The dragons represent the 2 halves of my soul." But, William reached into the hidden inner pocket of his tunic. He pulled out a thick, masterfully forged band of dark tungsten and jade, an archer's thumb ring. "I bought this on the same day," William said, his thumb brushing over Alex's cheekbone. He took Alex's right hand and slid the heavy, cool ring onto his thumb. It fit perfectly. One to wear in the hair, for all the world to see. One to wear on the hand that draws the bow, so I am always holding your hand in battle. I bought them for both of you, because my future didn't exist without both of you." Alex's snarky facade crumbled instantly. His breath hitched, and he looked down at the ring, then up at William's intensely devoted eyes. "Oh, you are good," Alex whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You are really, really good. Come here," William breathed, pulling Alex in by the waist and capturing his lips in a kiss just as fierce and desperate as the one he had given Leo. Leo watched them, a massive, warm smile spreading across his face. He stepped forward, wrapping his arms around William from behind, pressing his cheek against the general's broad back. William immediately reached one arm back, pulling Leo tightly against him while keeping Alex close. For the first time since they had transmigrated, the twins felt completely, utterly safe. The three of them stood intertwined in the firelight, the broken pieces of a 5-year-old tragedy finally, perfectly put back together. While the hawk flew north, Emperor Julian was rapidly losing control of his empire in the south. The morning court session was a disaster. The rumor that the twin consorts and the war god had vanished from the capital had spread like wildfire. The ministers were panicking. Without the twins in the palace, the alliance with the Grand Duke was effectively broken. "Your Majesty," the Minister of Finance wailed, falling to his knees. "The northern merchants have halted all trade caravans. They say they will not resume until they have proof of the consorts' safety. The treasury will run dry in a month." Julian sat on the throne, his face gaunt, his eyes bloodshot. He had not slept. They are merely visiting a summer estate." Julian lied through his teeth, his voice cracking. "Anyone who spreads rumors of their departure will be executed." The court fell into a terrified silence. They all knew he was lying. After court, Julian stormed back to his private chambers. Desperate for comfort. "Leon," he called out. "Leon, where are you?" He burst into Leon's quarters, only to find the room completely ransacked. The wardrobes were open, the jewelry boxes were empty, and the delicate silk robes were gone. A single, terrified eunuch was cowering in the corner. "Where is he?" Julian roared, grabbing the eunuch by the collar. "He left, Your Majesty." The eunuch sobbed. Concubine Leon packed his most valuable pearls and hired a carriage before dawn. He said the emperor was a doomed man, and he was returning to his family in the south. Julian dropped the eunuch, stumbling backward as if he had been physically struck. Leon had abandoned him. The twins had abandoned him. His brother had betrayed him. The absolute, crushing realization of his own powerlessness finally hit Emperor Julian. He wasn't a god. He was a lonely, bitter man sitting on a borrowed throne, and the people who actually owned it were coming to take it back. "Look at this," Leo said, leaning over the massive topographical map spread across the table in William's war room. He pointed a slender finger at the capital city. "Julian's defenses are entirely focused on the front gates. The southern supply line is completely exposed." William stood beside him, one arm casually draped around Leo's waist, looking at the map with deep concentration. "You are correct. The Imperial Guard is trained for palace defense, not a siege. If your father's army approaches from the north, Julian will pull all his troops to the front. Which leaves the back door wide open," Alex chimed in from the other side of the table, tapping a jade piece on the southern road. "William, you don't even need the Duke's full army. If your vanguard flanks them through the southern mountain pass while the Duke distracts them at the front, we can breach the palace before Julian even knows we're there." William looked up, his storm cloud eyes darting between the twins. He was continually astonished by them. He had expected them to be terrified, hiding in the manor while he handled the war. Instead, they had barged into his war room, armed with cups of tea and a terrifyingly sharp understanding of logistics and strategy. "Where did you learn to read troop movements?" William asked, his voice filled with a mixture of awe and suspicion. "We read a lot of history books," Alex lied flawlessly, not mentioning that their history books were actually thousands of hours playing strategy video games in their apartment. "Also, Julian is incredibly predictable. The man's ego is bigger than his brain." William chuckled, a low, rich sound that made both twins' hearts flutter. He leaned forward, pressing a kiss to the crown of Leo's head, and then reached across the table to affectionately squeeze Alex's hand. "You are brilliant," William murmured. "Both of you. With the Grand Duke's army and your minds. Julian doesn't stand a chance." Damn right he doesn't, Alex grinned, his eyes gleaming with anticipation. He thought we were just pretty faces to decorate his harem. It's time we show Emperor Julian exactly what happens when you mess with the twin Thorns.